Lawyers. Most people have strong opinions about the profession and the individuals who practice the trade. And when it comes to contracts, everybody knows the phrase, the big print giveth, while the small print taketh away. But love them or hate them, lawyers are trained to vigorously support their clients. And if you have a great business idea, one of these very clients can well be you. The focus of today's show is on the support entrepreneurs receive from their lawyers, or how you can have a lawyer be cost effectively on your side. Entrepreneurs come in all shapes and sizes, so today we have a diverse group of guests on the show.
This is The Language of Business with Greg Staller.
What do you get when you combine government relations, public policy, ethics, and entrepreneurship, besides just a long LinkedIn profile? The answer might be someone like Emily Taylor, who counsels people with great business ideas, someone like you, on everything from company formation to raising capital. Emily, welcome to The Language of Business.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Let's set the stage. You're sitting in your conference room with your requisite yellow legal pad. Somebody comes in with the greatest, latest business idea. And what do you think the first thing running through their head is? And more importantly, given that you've done this probably 100 times, what's the first thing running through your head?
Sure. Well, so those are the most exciting meetings, right? That's the part of my job where I get to sit and listen to these amazing ideas that people come up with. They come up with them in the shower, they come up with them in their lab and in the universities, and they come and explain them to me. So that's the most exciting part by far. In their head, I think they're thinking 10 steps down the road.
And they're thinking they have the next Google or Microsoft.
Right. And they're thinking, once I have the market share, that's assumed. Once I have the market share, this is the next exciting thing I'm going to do. Or this is my liquidity event. I'm going to sell to Facebook for $1 billion in 5 years, which is understandable. And I think the way I view my job is to roll them back a little bit and think about steps 1 and steps 2 and make sure we get those steps right.
And what would steps 1 or 2 look like?
So steps 1 and 2 would probably be, considering the idea and what's the valuable part of the idea. Is there intellectual property that should be protected? If so, are we protecting it adequately? Or what else do we need to do that? Do we have a company formed, an entity formed with limited liability protection? If not, then what type of entity should we form?
Although it might sound trite, are you only focusing on the legal aspect of getting them up and running, or how about the business aspect of it?
So the business aspect certainly comes in at that stage as well, and also sort of the financing aspect, right? Because everything they're talking about to make their business succeed, for the type of client I'm working with, they're going to need to raise a lot of capital. So I need to be thinking from an investor's perspective, likely a venture capital firm or another institutional investor. What are they going to want to see to fund this? Because if it can't pass that first hurdle, then it can't
They're
get on
never going to get to steps 2 or 3, etc.
Right. A lot of people can't start the business while they're working in their job and do it at nights. They have to take a leap of faith and do the initial planning stages and the market research on a little bit of a leap of faith on their own.
Talk to us, please, and our viewers about the changing laws in terms of preventing investors from getting scammed when it comes to raising money. We know about the blue sky laws, which are preventing unqualified investors, unsophisticated investors from losing their money. How does your counsel factor into that?
So selling securities, selling stock, in most cases is a big part of what my clients need to do. The general premise that you have to educate them on is just that securities need to be registered with the SEC to sell them.
And what does that mean for the benefit of our viewers?
So think of it as the initial public offering, the IPOs you read about in the paper. It's a long process. It's not an application with the SEC. It's a long, detailed process of filing what's called an S-1 registration statement. Most companies don't want to do that. So what they do, private companies try to find an exemption. And there are several detailed exemptions. The way I counsel my clients is, let's look at the general rules. There's always exceptions if you come with a very specific case we can talk about, but in general you want to sell to accredited investors.
Which means what?
Those are can be individuals or entities. If it's an individual, you're looking for individuals that make at least $200,000 individually or $300,000 combined with their spouse in the last 2 years, and a reasonable expectation that they'll make the same going forward. Or that have a net worth of at least $1 million, excluding their home.
And is that tangible net worth, or is that actual net worth?
So that would be actual net worth, excluding both their home and any debt they have in their home. So take that out of the equation.
Perfect. How much do you rely on templates when you provide counsel to new entrepreneurs?
Templates for documents are very important. Rely on them all the time. I think that most attorneys should, because no clients want you starting from scratch writing entire agreement sections and boilerplate. Legal advice, not so much. Legal advice tends to be more individualized, and a lot of times in a best case scenario, you take a template, you take a form, and then you get it 90% of the way there, and then you individualize it for the company based on the type of company,
so
based
you're
on the
using
company's
boilerplate
needs.
type legalese, but then you're customizing it to the individual entrepreneur, his or her situation, the characteristics of the company, etc.
That's right, and that's one of the advances of the last 10, 20 years, that large firms can now spend a lot of time on these forms and can continuously update them so that you can take them off the shelf rather than starting from scratch each time.
What do you do, Emily, if you have an entrepreneur operating in what he or she might perceive as an actual or perceived crisis situation?
So crisis situations are not that uncommon. So you have to gear your advice towards the specific sort of legal aspects of that situation. But for example, running out of cash is a crisis, and that's a crisis that a lot of startup companies face. And so you constantly counsel companies to be watching their cash flow, know when their out of cash date is, know when they're going to need to raise more money, because the closer you get to that line, the harder it's going to be to negotiate and raise money. But no matter how much you pay attention to that date and watch your burn rate and watch your cash flow, it can sneak up on you. And so if a client comes to me and they are out of cash on Friday, one of the biggest things we focus them on is the employees. So a lot of founders don't understand that employee wages are a bit of the end-all be-all. If you have to pay your employee wages. If you can't, you actually lose the limited liability protection of your corporate form. You can be personally responsible for those. So at that point, if you know you're out of cash, you need to be focusing both on turning the business to increase your cash amount, but also perhaps laying employees off or reducing salaries to minimum wage.
If you had to boil it down to one or two key pieces of advice for entrepreneurs, what would they be?
It's absolutely one. It's don't pretend you know something you don't know. It's perfectly fine to say to your attorney or to your banker in any other profession that you don't understand something. And I find when I'm working with clients, it's a lot more useful if we have that conversation up front and I take 5, maybe 10 minutes to explain a concept. And then they can go and run with it, as opposed to thinking they might understand what I was saying about selling to accredited investors, for instance, and then with half the information going and getting themselves into a problem.
Thanks, Emily. Emily Taylor on providing support to entrepreneurs and their nascent companies. But what happens if you've already launched your business and now you need a little bit of help developing it and bring it to the next level? Our next guest knows his craft so well, he's written 2 novels based in part on his past client work.
We'll meet Gene Barton next on The Language of Business.